We're talking, we've got this series that we're into right now called God Stories, Summertime God Stories. And we've been hearing from different people, and we've heard from a lot of different voices this summer, which has been great. And last week I thought was phenomenal. I thought Sam did a great job, and he's back here. He came back, and Sam and Maddie both, and did a great job of sharing and just telling what God's doing in our lives. And so that's been great. And today I just started thinking, it was hard. This week was hard for me because it was in between a lot of things and family camp, and we're not in Acts right now. And so when I'm in a series, it's you know where you're at months ahead of time, which makes things a little easier. And so this was a little bit of a process for me, and I was trying to think of my own life and what my faith journey is like, because we've been through quite a bit this summer as a church family, and some of us have been through incredible difficulties. And we've walked there beside folks that have gone through those things with the loss of Joel and a lot of sickness and a lot of difficulty and just everything else that's gone on. We've walked this road of faith in a very real way the last several weeks, where we don't have any choice but to look to God. We don't have any choice. There's no answers. There's no strength that we can draw from ourselves. There's nothing that we can lean on. Somebody told me during that time that I'm praying for you, told me that. And anytime you're in that situation, you're aware that you need prayer and you need something outside of yourself. But here's the thing. You don't need it any more than the times that you're unaware. You know? And it's just like this interesting, what a wild life it is to be a Christ follower. To be a Christ follower, to have this grand perspective in which we're able to place the rest of our lives, but yet to be on a journey of faith. And I think this little sentence right here describes my faith journey. And I think if we're honest, it probably describes a lot of ours. Is I believe, but. I believe, but. Right? Like I believe, but I don't understand. I believe, but I'm confused. I believe, but I can't see why. I can't see anything good from it. I believe, but. And there's a story in the Bible that I think encapsulates this idea and gives an amazing definition of what faith is. And I know we have the definition in Hebrews, the evidence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But I think practically speaking, this story has an amazing definition of faith. And so I'll set the scene for you. Jesus and Peter, James, and John they were on the Mount of Transfiguration. They're on the Mount of Transfiguration. And you guys remember when Jesus was transfigured and we get a glimpse of his glory, and you have Elijah and Moses there with him, and then Peter's like, we need to build 3 tabernacles here to commemorate it, and Jesus is like, just be quiet. And like he had to a lot with Peter. And so they have this amazing mountaintop moment. It's amazing mountaintop experience, and then they come down off the mountain. You see, the thing about the Christian life and the thing about this is we can't be mountaintop chasers. We can't be mountaintop chasers. We have those moments in our life that are just amazing and they're great, but we can't live there all the time. You know, there's these movements in Christianity that tend to be these mountaintop experience makers. And every time people get together and every time there's a service or every time there's a meeting, it's got to be this grand thing, and it's just not realistic. It's just not realistic because most of our lives are lived in the valley. Most of our lives are lived in the valley, in between these experiences. And that's exactly what happens with Jesus and his disciples. So they come off of the mountain, and here's what they find. It says, when they came to the other disciples, so they get back with everybody else, They saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. Isn't that great? I mean, you think everything's going amazing. You're up there. Peter, James, and John are like, it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, we just saw Jesus. Somehow, I don't know how they knew who Moses was. I don't know how they knew. Maybe they had "Hello, my name is" tags on. I have no idea. But they had Elijah and they had Moses, and they've seen Jesus, and they're watching all this, and they're probably floating off of that mountain. They're probably floating off that mountain thinking it doesn't get any better. And they get to the rest of the guys, and they're in a fight with the teachers of the law. They're in a fight. They're just going at it, arguing with each other. And it's like, yep, that's how it works, isn't it? That's kind of how it is. And they come down, and they're fighting. It says, as soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. Isn't that wild? The power of the person of Jesus. The power of the person of Jesus. You know, just that he's a person. And he brings this amazing aura of the fullness of the Godhead with him, so much so that when people saw him on earth, they were just attracted to him. And then perhaps offended by him or intimidated by him or whatever the case may be. But I love that about my Jesus. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. You know, I hope that if he were here today, I hope that the things that I believe about Jesus wouldn't keep me from seeing the real Jesus. You know? You know what I mean? I think we have these preconceived ideas, or we have this idea of how Jesus would be or where he would be or what church he would attend or whatever. And I wonder sometimes if I would even recognize him and have this I would be overwhelmed with wonder as well at where he was and what he was doing and just how full of love and grace and peace and mercy he really is, you know. So he comes down, and as soon as all the people saw him, they were overwhelmed. They ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. What's going on? What are you arguing about? A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." He's like a desperate father with a sick son. Man, you know, it's being a parent is hard. It's hard. How many of you knew how hard it was before you became a parent? Don't even try raising your hand. Don't even try it. And it's not hard because your kids are tough all the time. That happens. But it's not hard. It's hard because it starts off and they're so fragile, and you're like, oh, I hope I don't break it. Her, him, whatever. Not whatever, either her or him. So nowadays you have to say things you used to not think you had to say. But anyway, so you have this little baby in your hands, and you're like, I'm going to break it. I'm going to break him or her. And you're like, oh my goodness. And then you put him to sleep, and they give you 4,000 pamphlets about SIDS. Anybody else? You know what I'm talking about? You got these 4,000 pamphlets. You can't sleep them on their belly. You can't sleep them on their side. You can't sleep them on their back. You can't sleep them sideways. You can't put a pillow in there. Can't put a comforter in it. You know, it's like, I'm just going to hold this child up while I sleep and see what happens. You know, I don't, it's impossible, right? And after a while, you're like, just put them however they'll sleep. I don't care, you know, but then they start to crawl. And you're like, oh, that's cute, until they run over to the hearth on your fireplace about 90 miles an hour. Their little soft spot heads heading right for it, you know? So there's that phase. Then they start walking, and it's like, oh, all bets are off. all bets are off. I mean, they're all over the place. You got to get gates for your stairs. You got to get locks for you got to put little plugs in your plug-ins, because they're going to stick something in there because it's just what they do. I did that, by the way. I took shocking, right? Huh? Anybody? All right. So I took a 50-cent piece. No, it was a silver dollar. High money. I took a silver dollar and a hammer, and I pounded it. Somehow I got the cover off of my light switch in my room, and I climbed up on a chair, and I took that 50-cent piece or silver dollar and pounded it into the electric, and it blew me back across the room. I've still got this. My mom still has a silver dollar. It's got a big notch taken out of the side of it, and so yeah, that's what made me so smart. And but back in the 70s, it wasn't that big of a deal, It's like, anybody ever ride in the back of a pickup truck going 50? And you weren't riding in the back, you were sitting on the edge. Anybody? Yeah, drinking out of a water hose. I remember riding my bicycle to my friend's house, and we both lived in the city with a BB gun strapped to my back, and we went up into the neighbor's little place to shoot birds. Like, I don't know where those BBs were going. Nobody said a word. We're just out there with guns shooting birds. Different time. But you get to that phase, then they get to be like preteens, and they still like you at that point in time, which is cool. And but then they get to be teenagers, and then it's like the dark years. And, it's like there's like 13 to 18. It's like, okay, it's just, I hope this is turning out okay, And then adulthood, it doesn't get, it's like, okay, they're finally adults. Well, then they drive like thousands of miles, It's like, I can't do this. It's just constant. And I'm assuming it doesn't stop, Why? Because we love each other. We love our kids. And this guy had a son that was having a hard time, and he wanted help. And he came in, and he's asking Jesus' disciples to heal him, and they couldn't do it. And so they got in a big brouhaha over it. And so this father, in the midst of all this, is so desperate for his kid because this spirit keeps tossing his kid down. And he's foaming at the mouth, and he can't talk. And you'll see later, the spirit's trying to throw him in water and throw him in fire and all kinds of crazy stuff. You unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. It's like, it sounds harsh, doesn't it? The unbelieving generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay? I wonder what he would say about our generation. I wonder what he'd say about our generation. I don't know. I don't even know necessarily what to do with this. It's like, it's not a positive thing, right? You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. This is a serious situation. He's having a seizure, a convulsion, and he's foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him, but if you can do anything, notice what he says, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus says this, if you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. And here's the definition of faith. Here's the definition of faith. Immediately, didn't have to think about it, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. I think that's an amazing definition of my faith journey. I do believe. I believe that Jesus is God. I believe he was 100% God, 100% man. He came to this earth. He lived a perfect life. He went to the cross. He died for our sins. He rose again the third day. He ascended to the right hand of the Father where he is right now. He's watching over us. God the Father loves us more than we could ever get our heads wrapped around. All things are working together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. I believe. But I have a hard time. I have a hard time when life throws curveballs, when things happen that I don't get, when things happen that I don't understand. And this is my prayer, maybe not articulated like this, but I have this conversation with God a lot. I believe, but help my unbelief. Help me overcome those areas in my life where I don't believe. You know how I know that? Because I do believe, but there are times when I'm like, God, I got this. Don't worry about it. I know how I want this to turn out. I'd rather you kind of stay out of it because I've got my own plans and I want to do it this way. I believe, help my unbelief. Right? The rest of this story, which I'm not going to put on verses, but the rest of this story is Jesus honors this. And he goes and he heals the boy, and the demon tries to do some more harm, and Jesus casts him out, and then everybody thinks that the boy is dead, and Jesus reaches down and picks him up and raises him up, and the boy is healed. That's the end of that story. But here's the thing. A lot of the things that happen to us, we don't get that ribbon put on the end of it. It ends right here. It ends right here. And we may never, ever, ever see what the result is until we do see it. Because I believe we will when we're with him, if nothing else. We'll see how it all fits together. We'll see how it all goes together. I think I've got a couple of examples of this from just recently. A couple of examples of this idea just recently that we can kind of put together and see. And I believe we can build off of those things. And those things that do happen actually do help us to overcome our unbelief and strengthen our faith so that when things do happen that we don't understand, we can say, I trust you, God. Even though I may never see the answer. So, our kids, this story has been told 800 times, but that's all right, I'll tell it one more time. I think I tell it better, even though I wasn't there. Our kids went down on a big mission trip, right? Where are you guys at? All right, there you go. They went down on a big mission trip, and it's a big, long, 10-day mission trip, longer than it's ever been. They're going to go down, and they got big plans of going to the amusement park. They're going to go to gleanings and serve the Lord and people, and then they're going to go back to another amusement park and just have a absolute blast. They leave on a Friday. They get down there. They wake up the next morning to go, and they walk down, and the van and the trailer with most of their stuff is not in the parking lot anymore. It's not in the parking lot anymore. It's gone. Somebody stole it. So all the stuff, all their bedding, all the stuff. And so it seems like this big, crazy thing. We get a call at 7:30 in the morning or something on a Saturday, and I can't even figure out what's going on. Joy's on the phone. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who's Jason? What got stolen? And they didn't try to call me, by the way. They called Joy. And brilliant move there. Remember I pounded that thing in when I was a kid and messed things up. But I'm like all spun up. I can't believe somebody would steal a church van. Of course, they probably didn't know it was a church van, but they would just steal anything. I don't like thievery at all. It drives me nuts. I don't get it. I'm not a thief. Maybe that's part of it, but I don't get it. I don't get that whole mentality and mindset. And it made me so angry, and I was so mad, and I didn't know what to do because thinking, okay, we got way more kids than fit in one van, so we got to figure that out first. So we're trying to figure out everything, and it's just this crazy thing. They find the van a little later. They find the trailer. They come back, and it all finally, we get everything back, and happy ending, right? Here's the thing. What happened there was through that trip and everything that happened in that trip, It wasn't how we planned it, but it was how God planned it. And the way God planned it was He used those things to gel that youth group together in a way that Jason, who's not here right now, told me privately that he's never seen anything quite like this in his 400 years of youth pastor's experience. So, they're gelled together all of a sudden. It made them love one another, take care of one another, look out for one another. It put that camaraderie in there. It brought them together the way God did it, in a way none of us could have ever planned for it to be brought together. Right? 1873, November. There's a guy named Horatio Spafford. Horatio Spafford is in Chicago. I believe it was 1871. He was heavily invested in real estate in the city of Chicago, and the Great Chicago Fire happened, and he lost just about everything. It had been an extremely stressful time for him and his family. He was great friends with D.L. Moody. You guys ever heard of D.L. Moody? And D.L. Moody was going to be in Europe for a while speaking, and he was going to be in England on a big tour. And so Horatio Spafford thought, what a great thing to send my family over. We'll send them over on a ship, and then I'll catch up with them later, and we'll just enjoy a big, long European vacation, try to get our heads straight. He sends his wife, Ann, and their 4 kids between the ages of 18 months and 12 years old. He sends them on this ship, says goodbye. They're sailing out there, and about halfway across, they run into another ship, and the ship sinks, and 226 people die that were on that ship, including all 4 of their daughters. All 4. The ship goes on, or not that ship, but the wife, Anne, goes on, ends up in Cardiff and Wales, writes a telegram, and it says, "Saved alone, what should I do?" That's what he got. So he immediately went and got passage for England or Wales to go be with his wife and try to figure things out. And as they were sailing along, the captain knew what had happened. And as soon as they got to the spot where the accident had happened, he went and got Mr. Spafford and brought him to the deck of the ship. And as they went over the place where his daughters had perished, he penned the words that would end up becoming the hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." He goes on and meets up with his wife, and then a guy named P.P. Bliss finds the poem, and he puts the song to it, and there you go. Those seem like non-related things, don't they? I'm guessing Mr. Spafford and Mrs. Spafford could not make heads or tails of why this happened. And I'm sure there are multiple reasons why what happened in the grand economy of our great, loving, and merciful God. But one of those things was that song, that art that came from that grief. That art that flowed from a grieving heart, a heart that was hurt but also trusting, a heart that said, "I believe," but then said, "It's okay. I trust God." And he wrote that song out. Not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, we had a situation. I'm not going to rehash it. We had a situation happen. You guys know what it was. And we had a situation happen where our youth group needed to take care of one of their own in a very real, very tangible, very present way. And as I sat there and walked through this path from a distance and kind of observed everything that was happening, I saw this youth group that may not have been gelled like that if it hadn't been the way God did what God did, even though we didn't have all the answers at the time and we didn't understand what was going on. We didn't understand how they were going to get back. We didn't understand if we were going to have to drive down and get them or fly them back or send Steve Toomey's truck down and stick them on the back of it. We didn't know what we were going to do. But God did something through all those things and through that trip that gelled those kids together, so much so that just a few weeks later, they had no idea that the person they were going to be taking care of and loving and being with would need them so much. But I saw them rise to that occasion and be there, and it wasn't even a question. It wasn't even a question. It's beautiful. The beautiful thing. Then I sat here in a room full of people. Full of people. 600 people were in this building at the Celebration of Life service of Joel Tramby. 600 people. Sitting here, and it was just a beautiful service. Beautiful service. The testimonies, the singing, it was so much pain and beauty mixed together, you know? But at the very end, we sat here like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have throughout the last century and a half. And at the end, Jason played "It Is Well with My Soul," and we sang out. And we resonated with those words like maybe we had never resonated with those words before. And we sang to the top of our lungs. And when his piano dropped out, the windows were shaking because we all had that knowledge that was true. And all that came from another tragedy that we see as a tragedy and we see as a difficulty. And this guy penning that letter so many years ago, back in 1873, penning those words. And yet all those things come together in one spot. And you know what that is? That's when we say, "God, I believe, help my unbelief." And that's when God's saying, "Okay, I'll help you. I'll help you." He takes us on this journey. And he gives us these little things, and he gives us some of these smaller things that we see. And I had a situation where our car was broken into, and long story short, it was the worst thing ever, I thought. And it ended up being the thing that we needed to help us move out west. You know, it's a wild story. There's a lot more to it than that. But you see, you look back, and we see God's hand in so many ways that when something bigger happens and something a little more open-ended happens that is super hard to deal with and super hard to understand and super hard to get your head wrapped around, we can say, "I believe." Maybe I don't understand everything, but I believe. Help my unbelief. And God, as we look back over our lives and look back over our experience, has given us all these little things that make us realize that even though we don't see the big picture on everything, God does. God does. And he absolutely has this. It doesn't necessarily make things feel better. It doesn't necessarily make things look better. It doesn't necessarily do anything like that. But what it does is it helps us understand that we're on a journey of faith. We're not on a journey of no. You know, that's different. That's different. You know, it's like faith implies that we have to trust, and sometimes there's going to be doubt. Doubt is implicit in faith. You're not having faith if you don't have doubts, you know? And so as we go on this journey, the way God has us, He does such a beautiful and wonderful job of bringing us to the place where we have a deeper, more abiding trust in Him, so that when we go through things that we can't understand, we can say, as Horatio Spafford said so long ago, "I don't get it, it hurts, it's painful, I don't understand, and I can't wait till I do understand, but at the end of it all, it is well with my soul. Lord, I believe. I really, really do. I believe he's got this. But man, there are things that happen in life that make me say, Lord, I need help overcoming this unbelief because I don't see it. And God, in his mercy, his grace, and his love to us, reminds us, shows us, puts things in our path to help us to realize, even though we don't have all the answers, we can trust him and trust him fully. God, thank you for these examples that we have from Scripture. Thank you for these examples that we have from just living life. Some maybe mundane, some maybe not consequential, but yet as we look and we see your hand in the beginning and the end of these smaller arc of stories, where we can see the beginning, the middle, and the end, it helps us to realize how much you're working and how much you care for us, so that when we're in the middle of this bigger arc of a story where we can't see how everything ends, when we're dealing with heavy things like sickness and death and relationships and everything else that goes with those things, and we can't really see the end game, we can't see the horizon, and we never get there, we can trust that you are putting together this beautiful piece of artwork that will blow us all away, so that we can one day say, it was all good. You were right. You were working it out perfectly. And God, we trust you. God, we believe, but sometimes we need help overcoming our unbelief. And we thank you that your Spirit is here, that your people are here, that your word is here, and that we're doing this together, and we can help each other and encourage one another and do life together so that we can help understand and believe more and trust more fully in you. God, thank you for these lessons. Thank you for your working. Thank you for letting us in on the fact that we're going to be with you forever, so that we can live in the context of eternity and trust in the context of a loving God who isn't bound by time and is going to bring us in his presence forever one day soon. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm not going to sing you out of here, I promise you, but I'm looking forward to family camp. If you guys need anything at all, please holler at us during the week. Love seeing you guys, love being a part of this, and let's keep doing life together, amen? You're dismissed.